Hi everybody, welcome to season 5 of Educator Yarns. My name is Jess Staines. I'm the director of the Koori curriculum, which is an Aboriginal early childhood consultancy that's based on Dark and Young Country on the New South Wales Central Coast. We offer professional development for early childhood educators through webinars, retreats, events, and in-services. This time round on season 5 of Educator Yarns, I'll be joined by Burch, who's the founder of Kindy's Australia, which is a program that supports educators in enriching opportunities for play and learning in nature for children. Beck has an extensive background in early childhood education. She leads Bush Kindy's Australia, where they take children into nature spaces in all weather, and it gives them the opportunity to play and learn. Beck has experience that spans over many years regarding training and mentoring in nature play, and she's worked in Nature Play Queensland, TAFE New South Wales, and as well previously Cottonwood Learning. So welcome everyone to season 5 of Educator Yarns, where we'll be mainly focusing on the intersection of nature play and Aboriginal culture, and giving advice and hopefully some pearls of wisdom for early childhood educators who are wanting to delve deeper into Aboriginal programs and explore opportunities for rich and meaningful nature play experiences. Before we get into the episode today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered on and pay my respects to elders both past and present, as well as acknowledging any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander educators who are tuning in. I thought we might begin. Do you want to yarn a little bit about who you are and Bush Kindy's Australia and how that came to be?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. I love this partnership and really and looking forward to all the conversations we're going to have. Yeah, so Bush Kindy Australia came about. We did actually start as a local Bush Kindy program on Gold Coast called Cottonwood Learning, which still exists. And we were delivering professional development, but realised we needed to branch out a little bit. And so Bush Kindy Australia is a small team of facilitators, and we specialise in educational practice in nature pedagogy and Bush Kindy. And so, you know, a lot of people in our sector already know our facilitators. I'm one of the primary ones. Anya, who's come from Nature Play Queensland, and her background's in forest school in UK, has a wealth of experience. And Hannah, who has set up many Bush Kindy programs across Brisbane. And also Rita, who's come from Adventure Playgrounds in New Zealand. So we've got a really diverse group of people that help facilitate workshops and training. And then we partner with some amazing services, predominantly across Queensland, that are just doing amazing practice and being able to showcase that practice and give insights to other early childhood educators about how they can do it every day. And I guess all our team is still working in Bush Kindy, so we're still living and breathing all of those challenges, as well as all the amazing rewards of being outdoors in nature every day. So we can really relate to, I guess, particularly those challenges and share our insights and our solutions to early childhood educators to kind of get out in nature more. And whether it's just in their playground space or heading out the gate and heading into the community, we're there to support them, whatever part of the journey they're on.
Yeah, awesome. I think what you do is absolutely amazing. I got to meet your team last year when we did some of our sessions on the Gold Coast together, and their stories are just so good. I feel like we need to get them on the podcast at some point too, and they can share some of their stories, because they're like Rita and Hannah particularly were just like, yeah, love them.
Yes, absolutely.
And we first met when I was up visiting my auntie at Tweed Heads, and we did a workshop there, and you came along to that. And then from there, you ended up sharing some of your stories of practice in our book, which we self-published, which was also called Educator Yarns. And then last year, you reached out and invited us to come and collaborate with you on a workshop, which we've been running together, which is the new ELF principle. It's not so new anymore, but the ELF principles, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives and sustainability. And what's your sort of interest? Like, how did that come to be for you in your mind, that connection with us and Aboriginal programs, what you do?
I guess a number of different ways. I mean, I've always loved the work that you've done, Jess, for many years. The inspiration, but just the practical ideas that you share with your audiences is so valuable, and it's so much needed in our sector. And I still remember that first workshop many, many years ago that I went to, and I'd done many of your online ones, but I was just like, I just want people to be able to experience you in person and have some of those face-to-face workshops. Um, and so, yeah, that was one part of just being able to spread your knowledge and insights to a broader, and to come up to Queensland. There's lots of us that can't travel down Sydney to go to PD. Um, and I guess the other thing is just that real alignment between the work that we both do. Um, I think there's a lot of kind of myths, or sometimes it might just be a lack of information about nature play and that cultural awareness and respect. And I think it's just great to have these conversations going forward to sort of break down some of those myths and share some insights about how they do align, but also yeah, go into a little bit more deeper about that it's not just because we do nature play, we're doing cultural awareness and respect, and vice versa. Um, so I just thought, and I had educators kind of going, oh, if we do that, we're ticking that box as well. And I was kind of, that's not quite right. And let's share some informations. And I guess that's where I wanted to come to you and kind of go, let's work on this together and share both of our insights, just to enrich educators' knowledge and let them do the best they can.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And there is that intersection that we talked about in preparing for this episode on sustainable practices, nature play, and Aboriginal culture. So they're they're interrelated, right? But they're
Mm,
also three separate things. And
yeah.
one of the titles that we came up with for this episode was that it's more than just sticks and stones. So often when I visit early learning services and I'll say to them, like, tell me, how are you embedding Aboriginal perspectives in your program? What are some things that you're doing? And they'll say, well, when we do art with children, like we'll paint with sticks, and paint on leaves and paint on bark, and when we might paint on rocks and so forth. And I'm like, okay. And that's sort of the same when they're talking about sustainable practices and nature play. So I sort of feel like, yes, sticks and stones are part of it, but there's so much more to it than that. And like, let's get a
Mm,
little bit deeper, in what we're doing. And that's what I find so cool about like our collaboration, the things that we're doing, is that we're able to present like concepts and give two separate perspectives on the same concept, I suppose. But there's always a crossover. Um,
mm.
so when you go to services, what are some of those myths that you find that educators have in this space?
Yeah, I think one of the common ones I kind of hear is like, oh, if we're doing nature play and we're spending more time learning and playing outdoors in nature, and whether that's in the fence or outside the community, that then we are caring for country, and we're showing cultural awareness and respect, and we're doing that just because we're outside. Um, and I'm always encouraging everyone to be outside. I think that's fantastic. But I guess where we can kind of share is how can we make those links between when we are outside to that cultural awareness, and to those cultural practices. It's not just being outside, but I get that one a bit, is like, oh, we're outside, so we're ticking
We're
both
doing nature
boxes.
play. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm,
And I feel that sometimes when educators go outside and they're outdoors, and it's almost seen as a bit of a break for
mm,
teachers, like the children
yeah.
can just run, and like all the real learning happens inside in the classroom. And when we're outside, it's sort of just everyone can just have a run and burn off some energy, as opposed to actually looking at what nature is, and getting
Mm,
deeper into some research and exploring and topics of inquiry in the outdoor classroom. The other thing that I come against a lot is with acknowledgements of country, that it's just something that educators are saying. But when we stop them and say, well, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on where we are, and we pay our respects to elders, both past and present. And I'll say to them, well, who are the traditional owners of your area? And they might say, oh, the Dark and Young people. And I'll say, no, but who? Who are they? What are their names? And when they say, like, we pay our respects to elders past and present, I say, well, who are the elders and how do you pay your respects to elders past and present? So what are the actions, the things that you are doing? Or if they're talking about custodianship and they're saying we promise to take care of the land, it's like, well, how are you doing those things? So an acknowledgement of country, just like reconciliation, they're not just words, they're verbs, they're things that we do. And so I think that's for me where that crossover is that we're talking about as us as Aboriginal people as being custodians of the land, we're stewards of the land. We don't believe that we own it. We believe that we come from it. And our time is to live harmoniously and sustainably and to teach children and to be that as ourselves caretakers of the land. And so how are we nurturing this in children as part of our ethos and everyday practice? So things that, like I know that we'll do is, get involved in programs like Take 3 for the Sea and like actively collecting rubbish all throughout the year, not just during Clean Up Australia Day, or, creating green corridors, understanding what the traditional seasons are in the area, noticing and observing those seasonal changes, knowing at what times of the year we can plant or harvest different plants in our outdoor environment. And one of the things I know that we'll talk about it in another episode, I think, is when we're planting these bush tucker gardens, often I'll go to services and I'll say, oh, you've got some native plants. And they'll say, oh, yeah, can you tell us what they are? We don't know what they are. Or sometimes the plants are dead. They're not used or utilized at all. And I think, there has to be some intent in the message, like in how we're using these plants, but also an awareness of the message that sends to children, that we're not valued. Like, we've just got a bunch of dead plants uncared for. We don't know what they are. We don't do anything about them. They're just sort of there and existing. Yeah, I don't know if that is something that you've come across yourself.
I think that knowledge searching is really relevant and really important for us as educators to be focusing on, because some of us might have done training 10, 20 years ago, or even 5 years ago. And nature pedagogy, for example, isn't covered very well, and sometimes not even at all, in our Cert 3 or diploma, and very minimally in our bachelor. So there is this kind of lack of knowledge. And then I find the same, if we've done training 10 or 20 years ago, and we might have just done a few PDs, then we don't necessarily have that same knowledge around that cultural awareness as well. So I think as educators, we need to take a bit of responsibility for that knowledge searching. And, there's lots of ways we can connect with people in our community. There's lots online of, working out what are those plants, who's in our community that can share that knowledge. And the same goes for nature play. Like one of those things I hear all the time is they go out, and like we're outside, and like you say, burning off the energy, but we don't know what to do there. And it's really typical in bush kindy. So we've helped lots of services get their bush kindy up and running. And primarily the focus sometimes starts with, let's make sure our policies are on track and our risk benefit assessments, we're doing this safely, we've got some staff training, and they get out there, but then they're like, we don't know what to do out here except burn off the energy, except kids running around, because the safety part was priority, which I think is really important. But the educational practice hasn't necessarily been part of their qualifications and training. And so that's where I think that, looking for knowledge and, enriching our own understandings around what we can do outdoors, what we can learn about plants, who we can connect with, I think is really important as our own responsibilities as educators and service providers to kind of support our teams. If, we're investing, if there's an invoice going through and investing and we're buying $1,000 worth of bush tucker plants, are we spending that same amount of money on having some reference books or having a local community person come in and share the knowledge about those plants? And it's not just about heading out to nature or just popping some plants in. It's about that knowledge that goes with that.
And so can I ask you back, like the title of the episode that we were playing around with was More Than Just Sticks and Stones. So what more can educators do in a bush kindy program? I know that might sound like such an obvious question to ask, but what do you see educators doing in a nature-based program? Hi, everyone. I'm just jumping in quickly to remind you all that Beck and I have a series of upcoming events and workshops all throughout Queensland where we'll be yarning about the new ELF principles, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives, and sustainability. We'll be in Toowoomba, Cairns, the Gold Coast, Brisbane, Mackay, Townsville, you name it, we'll be there. And we hope to see you all there. All right, take care, everyone. Enjoy the episode.
Yeah, look, I think one of the beautiful things about Australian bush kindy programs, and we might call them nature immersion programs because some are doing beach and creek and all sorts of things, is that they are so unique and contextualized to each community. And I think that's what's special about Australian programs, as opposed to, say, some of the forest school models overseas that look and feel quite different to ours. They can be quite set and structured. So I guess everybody's doing something different based on where they're exploring and the age of the children. But I think, again, it comes a little bit to training that we can sometimes tend to be focused on setting up spaces, setting up a mat, setting up tables, preparing learning opportunities, creating our environment aesthetically pleasing and welcoming to get children in. And that's really important. But when we're outside in those nature spaces, there is a bit of shift in that educational practice to kind of go, what is actually already here out in nature that is an opportunity for play and learning? Sometimes it just takes a moment to kind of stop and pause and actually really look and go, well, actually, there's this amazing tree here that's, dropping these gorgeous flower petals, or has got lots of butterflies around it, that really inspires those inquiry kind of projects and all the curiosity questions that children ask. So I think if educators can kind of take that moment to kind of really go, what is our space providing? And even if it's a tiny little nook of a garden, even if it's a pot plant, like on verandas, even if it's just looking up at the sky, it's just taking those moments to look and giving children that opportunity to just be present in the moment. And when they're present in the moment, they have that natural curiosity. Every child is born with that innate sense of awe and wonder. We all know that. And they will ask the questions, and that can lead that inquiry-based child-led learning. So I think when we go from that point, suddenly our eyes open to like, there is way more than sticks and stones, and it might be bark, it might be vine, it might just be the color of certain leaves, it might be the lichen and moss growing on a trunk. It's kind of paying attention to all those little things, the trail of the ant. I often ask educators to kind of head outside when they go to their service one morning and just stop and have a look what's actually out there, and think about what learning opportunities exist around that. So, for example, we've got acres of space that we can explore in our community, but there's one little spot that we stop that's by our toilets, and there's this tree, and at the start of every year, it comes into blossom in these gorgeous yellow flowers. And so the children just naturally notice them. They, fall and drop down in the wind, and it's just so vibrant in yellow. So they ask questions about this tree and the flower petals, and they pick up and they want to play with them. And we see about that same time that all of these butterflies move in and fly everywhere around it. So again, giving children the time and space, they just then ask questions about, is it a butterfly? Is it a moth? And why is there so many? And what are they eating? Like that just leads your inquiry and leads your learning experiences to learn all about the butterflies. What we see is those flowers start to die off, and we see seed pods start to grow, and some of the seed pods drop down. So again, more questions from the children. And when the butterflies kind of move out after a couple of weeks, we see cockatoos fly in. And these big group of white cockatoos, it's the only time we see them in our site every year, lots of them for several weeks, and they're just eating all of the seed pods. So again, children have all these questions, and we start learning about birds. And then, after a couple of weeks, all those seed pods start dropping down. The children start using them in the mud kitchen, and they're using them in craft. They use them in so many different ways. But in that couple of month period, they've showed a whole lot of inquiry just around the tree and that whole life cycle and the blossoms and the seed pods, but then the butterflies, the birds, so much from just one tree.
Mm.
And we all have more than just one tree or one plant in our space. But I think as educators, part of our training is like focus on our learning environments of like the table, the mat, this nook, the sand pit, the this, but like where we have these beautiful gardens. And sometimes we, I work with services that have a playground on a third-story building. We might not have the big garden, but it might be the neighbor's big tree that overhangs the fence. There is always out there. So I guess my encouragement is for educators just to actually stop and look, and those opportunities of inquiry-based learning that's coming from child initiations and child's curiosities will present themselves. And it might not necessarily be the things that we think about. Like we might go, oh, wow, there's, this tree that's dropping all these beautiful pink flowers, but the children are actually more preoccupied with this pile of mud that's sitting at the base of it that they can stir up and make mud kitchens with. So I guess, yeah, from across all of the Bush Kindy programs, we get to visit so many. We're so lucky. Everything we do inside, we can do outside. So we see programs doing, creative and art experiences. It's just using different resources, natural resources. They're, fine motor and manipulative and construction, but it might not be pre-built commercialized blocks and Lego. They're using sticks, or it might be rocks, it might even be mud. They are instead on obstacle courses that are made out of metal or wood or our climbing frames or structures. They're making their own obstacle courses out of sticks. Predominantly, I see a lot of stick play, but also lots of other things. So I guess everything I see that they can learn inside, or that we might typically provide for them, even stories. So yes, a lot of services will take books out to Bush Kindy as well, but we can also do stories with the leaves that are on the ground or the flowers, a lot of oral storytelling. So, I think if you went to work tomorrow and the building was completely closed and they're like, oh, there's an infestation of ants in your building, you can't go, you just have to use the outdoor playground. I think we could all adapt and, still be able to provide all those different learning opportunities throughout the day. We would just use different resources. We would just use natural materials to, support their early literacy and numeracy and those things. But it's just for educators to kind of make that shift and be open, like stopping and pausing, going, what's in our space? What can we actually utilize for those play and learning opportunities?
I feel like sometimes it's just about becoming a big kid yourself. And like you said, like taking some time, even without children, to just go and reconnect to country in your own time, to look at what sparks your curiosity and what's there. And often, I have predetermined ideas of what I would like to share with my daughter, Shirley. And when we go out, those things never happen. And sometimes it's to my like bitter disappointment. It's like, come on, we're going to look at these tracks and whatever. And she's like, no, like she has her own ideas. And sometimes it's just about trying to find different ways to climb trees, and sometimes it is playing with sticks and stones. Like, she loves sticks. We're always picking up sticks. We have a car full of stones and rocks that she's picked up on her adventures, where we've gone out different places. But sometimes it's a wizard wand, or it's a walking stick, or it's a sword, or we'll collect branches and make a campfire. We've made cubbies and houses in our backyard. There's so many things that we've made out of sticks, and stones is a favorite, whether it's collecting and looking at shapes or textures, or seeing if they sink or they float, or if we can skip them in the water. There's, it's endless. Or arranging them in different patterns is something that we'll do often. So sticks and stones, I don't want to, diss them. There is definitely a place for sticks and stones. But when I think about culturally the way that we see sticks and stones, it can be making like a message stick, where if you would use a message stick if you were going from one nation into another and you didn't share the same language, and you would put symbols on there to make your meaning known, to ask for permission to enter into their area, for whether it's for trade or for sorry business. You might use stones on country, and it could be the carving into stones or the arrangement of stones, and these we referred to as marker stones, to share about the geographical location of where you are, whether it was a boundary or it was a sacred site or somewhere for women's business. So for people that were traveling through, they were able to see this and understand the significance of the place that they were walking on. And then obviously we have different stones like and rocks to like ochre that could be used for ceremonial painting or painting on bark, or it could also be to use as sunscreen on our bodies. So different rocks, the arrangement of them, there's different uses of sticks to make tools, to make digging sticks and so forth. So these things do have cultural significance for us as well. And there's so much that we can draw children's attention to. I mean, for me, the natural fit is obviously looking at bush tucker and looking at the seasons of the place where you are and looking at the local ecosystems and having that understanding of how our people have lived with country and walked with country for thousands of years, and how you can impart some of that knowledge with children and expose them to that. And I know as a big part of your program you work with local community as well, and this is something that we have been asked back, haven't we, like with our collaboration, is that for me coming to Queensland, like I'm Wiradjuri, so that's where my mob's from in New South Wales. I live on the New South Wales Central Coast, but it's like, aren't there local people that does what Jess talks about, that you could be partnering with? And I think it's not, at least, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not a one or the other scenario. You personally at Bush Kindy Australia work with lots of Aboriginal people, knowledge holders, language custodians, cultural custodians, traditional owners and so forth, artists. You're very well connected with your local community. There is a difference, and this is what I often say when I do my work right across Australia, is that I don't presume to teach about local history, local language, or local culture. That's absolutely not my place, and I would never assume to do so. The work that I do is very much looking at curriculum and looking at practices as a First Nations Aboriginal educator, and what I have done in my experience, and giving lots of examples of how this can work. So looking not just at processes, practices and principles that then supporting educators to contextualize that to where they are. And a huge part of that as would be for them to go and work with local community in their area. So we're really big on having those multiple voices. The work that I've done nationally has been with peak bodies like Early Childhood Australia, developing their latest module on intercultural ways of knowing, being and doing. I've also done work with Reconciliation Australia and their Narragansett platform, which lots of educators work with nationally. You'll see a lot of me talking in their videos of their mandatory actions. And we recently also helped BU create a protocols document, and that was with a working group with stakeholders from right across Australia coming together. So my space has been, and work in early childhood has been nationally, that bigger sort of picture of things, and then supporting educators to contextualize that to the place of where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as all educators and services, there's many sources of information we can tap into. And I think you provide some amazing practical kind of insights and things that we can do. And one of those key messages you always deliver is about tapping into your local people and your local communities. And, even when you just brought up, sticks before, that's even something that is very localized and very place-based around how sticks and different trees are used in different areas. So I work with Uncle Frank, is one of the elders I work with quite closely, and I've worked with him for many years now. And, he shares when we do sessions with him all the time, one of the trees that he talks about and he shares with children or educators when we're doing sessions is the cottonwood tree. And it's an amazing tree, hence why I named one of my businesses after it. But he talks about how when they prune it, it's a tree that loves being pruned, and he takes some of the bark off. And there's some beautiful properties about this tree. One, when you take the bark off, there's this sap that is antibacterial. So it has a medicinal property. But the pieces of bark string off in really tiny, skinny threads like string, and then weaves them and makes rope. And then that rope is used to make animal nets. And so locally, he shares in his area that typically say traditionally, boomerangs and spears weren't used very often traditionally because it's a high rainforest area. And if those things were thrown in those spaces, you would only have one throw and get them back. This is what he always shares. And so what they did use traditionally is the cottonwood tree and the bark, where it is made into rope, woven, and then made into like fish nets or animal nets. And, that's what's relevant in that local area, but that's not the same necessarily across all of Australia. And I think that's what's important, is for everybody to kind of, tap into those local communities and find out about the local knowledge about what actually happens on land in those spaces. And in particular, like even those seasonal indicators of plants are very different across Australia.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just looking at the time, and I think we're out of time for this episode, but I know that our next episode, we're talking about the 7 R's of sustainability, which is rethink, refuse, reduce, reuse, repair, regift, and recycle. So I hope that for the people that are tuning into this episode, that you found what we're sharing helpful. If it has sparked your curiosity and you're interested in some of our workshops, you can find what Beck does at Bush Kindy's Australia or Cottonwood Learning. You can find what I do at Koori Curriculum. And on both of our websites, you'll also see our collaborative events that we are running together that at the moment are just based in Queensland, but you never know, they could go elsewhere, and they're coming up shortly. So be sure to check them out and tune back in for our next episode, which is on the 7 R's of sustainability. So thanks, Beck, for joining me.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. To find out more information about the Koori curriculum and how we can best support you in your early learning service, visit www.kooricurriculum.com.